Well, to discuss this, I'm joined here in the studio by Jasmine El-Gamal. She's a former advisor to the U.S. Defense Department on Middle East issues and now a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. In Doha, we have Fadel Abdelghani. He's the founder of the Syrian Network for Human Rights. And in London, we have Ammar Waqaf, the founder and director of Gnosis, a think tank focusing on the Middle East. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers. Fadel, let me start with you. There are those who look at the numbers, and granted, it's not massive numbers, but they look at the numbers of Syrians returning home from places like Jordan, and they say, well, if it's good enough for the refugees to return home, does that tell us that there's peace in the country, or at least there's a process towards peace enough to inspire them to go home?
Actually, the question is how much the percentage. If we are talking about 17,000, there is 1.5 million in Syria. So this is like about 1.1%. So this is only 1% who is coming back. The question is, why didn't all come back? Because we need to go back. Who is for the reason why those become refugees? Why like half the Syrian population transfer to be either IDP or refugees. The main cause is the violation against them, which is amount to be crimes against humanity and war crimes. The shelling, the extrajudicial killing, the sexual violence. Those are throwing the barrel bombs against them, destroying their houses and shops. Those are mainly committed by Assad regime that lead those people to be refugees.
Right.
This cause and root of the problem doesn't solve till now.
Right.
So this is the main issue, that the people doesn't come back. I'm giving you an example now, and this is now statistics about who is back from Jordanian. 70. We in SNHR documented 78 arbitrary arresting cases against including 8 Jordanian. And 6 of them released after 1 month, including 1 journalist, and 2 still disappeared.
Jasmine, in Lebanon, in Jordan, these countries have had tremendous social upheaval as well with the influx of refugees. It's caused a lot of debate within these societies and so on. Politicians in these countries are saying, okay, it's time to go back home. Is it a safe country to return to?
I think, first of all, kind of differentiating between the situation in Lebanon and the situation in Jordan is really important, because the situation in Jordan is much less inclined to push refugees back into Syria before they're ready. Whereas in Lebanon, because of the massive influx, refugees are 1/4 of the Lebanese population in Lebanon. It's quite a different situation than Jordan. So there's much more pressure on the refugees in Lebanon to go back. In Jordan, it's an interesting case to look at, because the government has said to the refugees, basically, look, we know eventually you're going to have to go back. This isn't really sustainable, but don't go back before you're ready. So there's less pressure on them. And so that, so in that sense, if you look at the refugees in Jordan and look at how few of them are going back, it really does tell you that there are very real reasons and very grave concerns on the part of these refugees that are preventing them from going back. So I just want to state one quick statistic to demonstrate this. So UNHCR, which is responsible for refugee affairs in the region, does these intention surveys every few months where they go and they ask refugees about their intentions to return, why they want to return, why they don't want to return. In Jordan, where there's not much pressure on them to return, 66% have said to UNHCR that they want to return back home one day, but 78% have no plans to do so in the next 12 months. So that should tell you that even though they want to go home and they don't feel pressured, they still don't feel like the time is right. And we can go into the reasons why later.
Ammar Waqaf, it's not a safe country to return to. And as Fadel said, you go back and you could be picked up and, I don't know, end up in prison as well. This is not a good time for Syrian refugees to go back home. What do you think?
Well, to the contrary, I think, we're yet to hear of a trend of detaining people who have come back from the outside. We understand that tens of thousands have done so from Lebanon, and probably up to 17,000 have done so from Jordan. These are the registered ones. There are others, many others, who are simply not registered with UNHCR, who chose to get out of the country when things went south, and they found some work permit in Lebanon, Jordan, and other areas, and they decided to come back. You can add to that also the internally displaced people. If you take the example, for example, of Aleppo, you know, up to 1.5 million internally displaced refugees went back from the coastal area to Aleppo after it went back to government control. We hear of no problems at all. Problem is that certain places are so devastated that it's not easy for people to come back, and there is shortage of you know, manpower to do some reconstruction, and obviously there are shortages in funding and so on. But at the end of the day, there are more underlying issues why people don't want to go back. Mainly and chiefly is the military service. And you can distinguish between, for example, a younger generation who want or do not want to go to military service, and older generation who will go back as reservists.
Let me come in here.
And who have families to feed.
Yeah, So Fadel, address this point, right? So we have Ammar giving the example saying once Assad's government took control of Aleppo again, you can follow the traffic and you can see that people returned. It suggests that people found it safe enough to return to. Address that.
I don't believe in Assad government, first of all. I believe what the Commission of Inquiry said, the investigation committee of the Syria, which is issued their recent report past month in second recommendation, and everyone can see that it's available in Arabic and in English. In their recent report, mentioned very clearly that the situation in Syria forbidden and still unsuitable to the refugees or to the IDP to go back. That's very clear. After they document and after they recorded several types of violation against the civilians in Syria. This is the first point. The second point is that why this regime and his followers also want this propaganda. The regime, who is the one who displaced those? Who is the one who threw the barrel bombs against them? This propaganda actually served the regime narrative that the refugees start be back, and so that you need to actually back again and start dealing with me politically and start the reconstruction. Everything is okay. That's actually the regime message. The regime doesn't care at all.
So let me get it.
And that's very clear on his tongue. Actually, Jamil Hassan mentioned that clearly.
So let me.
It's available on YouTube.
Fadel, let me do this. Allow me to do this. I'm gonna get an addition from Jasmine, and then I'm gonna get Ammar to respond. Jasmine, do you believe that the Syrian regime, and I guess we can add to that perhaps the Russians as well, are creating a narrative to make it seem as if things are winding down, people can come home?
Without a doubt. The Syrian regime wants everybody to know that the war is over, that they've won, and that it's time for people to come back. Because if it's time for people to come back, that also means that it's time for reconstruction money to flow in. It's time for embassies to open up for countries to open up their embassies and normalize relations with the regime. And it also allows the Russians to claim that the person that they are backing and were backing has won. So there's a very clear narrative, and you can see that in the way that the Russians inflate the number of returnees from the real numbers. So if you look at, and I just want to respectfully disagree with Ammar, who says that there have been no cases of people being disappeared or killed or arbitrarily detained or arrested or conscripted when they go back to Syria. There have been plenty of anecdotes and evidence that tells us that people just simply don't know what fate awaits them when they go back to Syria. It makes it impossible for any responsible human being, especially someone who's responsible for the safety of their families, to take their families and go back to a country where they simply don't know what is going to happen to them when they go back. There are three reasons. It's not just conscription, as Ammar mentioned. There are three main reasons, according to refugees themselves, why they're not going back to Syria. First, and by far, is the security situation, and that includes conflict, it includes war, situation, but it also includes the arbitrary arrests and detentions that I'm talking about. They can't guarantee their safety. The second reason is livelihood and having a job. They just simply can't guarantee that as well. And the third and equally important reason is housing issues and concerns. They don't know if they have a house to go back to, if their house is going to be occupied by someone else, or if they're going to be allowed to live where they originally lived before they were forced to become refugees.
Right. So, Ammar, difficult to disagree with Jasmine.
No, not much really. I mean, the issues she mentioned, I was cut when I started with I was going to those later, but you know, I was only allowed to speak about conscription. But that is an important matter because, again, the reservists especially tell us that you know, unlike younger people, they have families to feed, and you know, securing the livelihood of their families is a major concern, added to the insecurity of being a military soldier in the time of war. But I didn't say there were no cases. I said there is no trend that we can identify. We need to be a little bit practical here. We shouldn't naively assume that everybody who's returning home is returning without an agenda. Some people might have certain affiliations, and it is probably the duty of the Syrian authorities to investigate people who might want to blow up themselves with a suicide veld later on. Indeed, we hear certain incidents of a certain convoy here being attacked, or an ambush here for some Syrian, and this all within Syrian-controlled areas. So the authorities need to be vigilant, and the population inside Syria expects their authorities to be vigilant. And if it is okay for example, German authorities to put some you know, a Syrian warlord or an ex-commander of the Free Syrian Army to trial in Dusseldorf, then we should expect the Syrian authorities to have the same right. Yes, probably in Germany they might have a fairer trial, but
So you want to dissect among the refugees. You're not sure of all of them, Jasmine?
Well, I think the rebuttal to that is fairly simple, which is that the Syrian regime actually has to review a list of every refugee that wants to go back to Syria, whether it's from Lebanon or Jordan. The government hands over a list of people who have signed up saying they want to go back, and the Syrian regime gets to review that list, and they get to actually approve or deny people from going back. So we can't really say that they're taking anyone back that they're not aware of, don't know exactly who they are or what they might want to do or what their agendas or affiliations are, as Jamal said, or as Ammar said. They know exactly who's coming back. Sorry if I misspoke his name, but they know exactly who's coming back.
Sorry, on this particular point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I comment on this particular point, please? Because not everyone who's returning to Syria is going through the UNHCR route. Some people are going voluntarily. You know, if you go to the Syrian border, you'd see lots of people, some of them not only tourists, but or people like myself, for example, visiting parents and family, but also people returning back. Again, they are not registered with the UN, and there are no lists. And it could be the case that some arbitrary, as described by your esteemed guest, detentions.
I have one. So listen, so Fadel, come in. Listen, I just need to get in here. Both your windows, Ammar and Fadel, are going to drop in 45 seconds, right? So we'll just see color bars. So Fadel, if you want to come in, you have to answer in 20 seconds, please, and that'll be our final answer.
The regime is betray his allies, actually. So even if the regime accepted some refugees to be back, no one prevent the regime or give protection to any Syrian if the regime decided, or his security forces in any time, under any circumstances, to torture them and to arrest them again. Who give them guarantee from this regime? No one actually said that the state should never review or whatever. But where is the fair trial?
That's a fair point.
The destiny?
And that's at the heart of it all.
82,000 Syrians still disappeared.
And that's why a lot of people don't trust the regime, right? That's at the heart of it. Listen, Jasmine, Fadel, and Ammar, it's been a pleasure. I've got to move on. I thank you for joining us.